I'm going to go over some of the basics of setting up game characters for a 2D game. I'm going to be using sprite sheets. With any project, it is best to plan out as much of the project as possible beforehand, do as much reference drawing as possible, try to create model sheets, try to create layouts to explain your environments. You're never going to get everything done beforehand, especially if you're working by yourself. The more people who are involved, the more important the planning is. If you're working on your own project by yourself, you have more leeway to develop as the project goes along. What I'm doing here is horribly underdeveloped, but at least it will give you some idea. I basically did some quick drawings as to what the character will look like. I just preview it in the render. Basically see, screwed around for a basic look of what the main character would look like. Usually you're going to develop your characters off a single character. A famous example would be with The Simpsons. All of the characters were modeled off Homer Simpson. Then I did a bit more of a character pose for the character, get a bit more of an idea of what he's going to look like. And then what I've done is I've done some very loose sketches to get an idea of what poses the character will have to go through. These in this case are extremely rough. So if we look over here, we've got very, very small, very loose character pose. And what I'm going to do with all of these character poses is I'm going to lay out where the sprite sheets are going to be for the main character. And the reason I want to lay all of these out is so that when I do the sprite sheets, I have enough room for the camera so that the sprite sheets will all fit in correctly before I start animating. Now all of the poses are very rough, and all of the initial animation is going to be very rough as well. I'm actually going to leave detailing the animation till after I've got the actual game engine up and running, because in order to find out if the character is going to work, I want to know if the controls of the character will work with the rough animation. If I put too much effort into the final animation too early, I could end up with something which doesn't operate the way I want it to. So I'm going to leave that till after I've got everything up and running. I'm now going to organize all the poses for my game scene, and I'm going to make it so they're roughly the same scale. In order to make this easier, I'm going to make all the layers transparent. I'm going to use the color filter in order to show which layer is transparent more clearly. I'm now going to quickly set up some cameras for the scene, and these cameras are going to be the cameras I'm going to render with, and I'm going to set up 3 of them. And these cameras are all going to go under the same peg. So the peg is going to control the transformation of the cameras, and the cameras are going to be different resolutions, and they're all going to be square cameras. So the first camera, which is camera 2, I'm going to rename to 4096, which is going to be a 4096 by 4096 camera. This camera will be the largest camera that I use for rendering. And it's mainly for if I decide to render the frames individually instead of rendering as a sprite sheet. So the next camera I'm going to make will be camera 3, which will be renamed to 256, and it will be 256 by 256, which, as you see, is quite a lot smaller. And these would be the minimum size I would want to make individual sprites for my personal uses. If you're doing pixel art sprites, you can do much smaller resolutions. You could do 16 by 16 or 64 by 64 to get away with it if you're going for a pixel art style. This is not going for a pixel art style, so I'm going to do this as my smallest value. And then the last camera I'm going to set up is going to be camera 4, which is going to be 512 by 512, which would allow me more resolution than the 256. Now, I want to have all of these cameras taking up exactly the same space. So I want to be able to move the cameras with the peg and have all of these cameras in exactly the same position and be in the same scale. So I want to basically have all of the cameras this size. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to scale up these cameras. Now, there's not a specific rescaling value in OpenToonz. You can have the shrink value, which will output your render at smaller values, but that is primarily for testing and isn't for final renders. So here I have Windows Calculator, very basic, not particularly much value as a calculator, and Microsoft actually give out better calculators for free, but this is still sufficient for what I need to do. We'll take the larger value, 4096, and divide it by the smaller value. In this case, I'll get 16. And since this is a scale, I need to multiply it by 100 because it's a percentage. The same thing would happen with 512. And because these are powers of 2, I'll get whole numbers. And those whole numbers will actually be powers of 2 as well. So to scale 256 up, I will just scale it to 1600%. And camera 512, I'll scale up by 800%. So now cameras 256, 4096, and 512 will render exactly the same thing in exactly the same position, but they'll just give me different resolutions. So if I'm making sprite sheets in another package, or if I'm using individual frames, I will get the same image at different scales.